right, thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to start the webinar today, and just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you're new to Zoom, you do have some controls to raise your hand or chat within the Zoom platform. So if you have any technical issues or want to chat, feel free to use that. We will be having a Q&A at the end of the webinar, and there is a Q&A function in the webinar platform with Zoom. So I will show you a screenshot at the end, and we will use that for the Q&A. My name is Colin Bell. I'm the CEO of RecycleSmart, and I'm happy to be joined today by Jeff Wint, Sales and Business Development Manager for Recycling Alternative, and Alistair McCallum, Account Manager with RecycleSmart. And today we're going to be talking about processing organic waste using on-site processing equipment. So we're going to be talking about some of the big picture aspects that you should consider, benefits, pros and cons. Keep in mind today is a high level of the concept of on-site waste processing for organic and food waste, and not a sales pitch of any particular type of equipment. We will be talking about the equipment that Recycling Alternative has experience with and sells, but it is a broad discussion of the overall idea of using on-site processing equipment instead of using containers or bins to remove this waste from your business and take it to an off-site processing facility. Just a quick intro for RecycleSmart. We were founded in 2008, and we're Canada's largest waste and recycling management provider. So we don't own any trucks or bins. We subcontract to our vendors, and we provide a one-stop shop for our clients active in all provinces from coast to coast. We have over 5,000 sites under management, and we have over 3,000 IoT devices such as sensors, monitors, and smart buttons deployed and active in the Canadian market. We're privately held, and we're not affiliated with a waste hauler. So that's RecycleSmart, a bit of a nutshell. Some of the customers that trust RecycleSmart, it's a broad mix from retail, property management, hospitality, a broad range of different clientele. Essentially anyone with waste and recycling that they would like to manage better could benefit from the services that RecycleSmart provides. We definitely do focus on a few main sectors, such as commercial property management, shopping centers, hotels, retail, and distribution, but anyone who doesn't fit in those boxes is also welcome to become part of the family. So quick overview of kind of what's happening now in the market if you're not using a service provider such as RecycleSmart is you're likely getting hundreds of invoices if you operate multiple locations across the country, dealing with a lot of different vendors, and your collections are likely not optimized, so likely operating on a set schedule, and the truck comes to pick up your waste or recycling based on a preset schedule, regardless of what happens for your business levels. Poor recycling programs, not all, that's a bit of a generalization, but we do see a lot of poor signage and confusion over what goes in what bin, and as a result, a lot of contamination. And then data, really asking clients and prospects over the years what their diversion rate is, how much are they recycling, is their program getting better? Often they don't know the answer to that question, so the data is often tough to get, or when you do get it, not very complete. So the future, if you join RecycleSmart, is better, it's brighter, and really what that means is consolidating invoicing. So instead of receiving those hundreds of invoices, you're getting one consolidated invoice. You might still be using a lot of vendors, but RecycleSmart receives and audits those invoices. Smart IoT bins to optimize collection schedules. So we want your bins to be collected when they're full, not when they're overflowing, but just in time. So you're not paying to haul away air, but you're also not having overflow. And on the recycling program side, we want clear signage, on-site training, things like the smartphone app to really give people as many platforms as possible to get recycling right. And then the data platform to track and guide decisions. So giving you data on what's happening so that you can see if your program is working, is it failing, is it doing what you want it to do. So that's really our value proposition in the market. I'll stop with the RecycleSmart sales pitch now, and we'll get on to, one more sales pitch slide, sorry. Just a quick definition of smart waste management. It's a term that we throw around, and I think that for us, it makes sense, but just to make sure it makes sense for everyone else, really what it means is that we're gathering real-time data using IoT technology, and then we're making it easy and straightforward. So using tools other than just signage or leaflets, such as the web or the smartphone app, in order to give people good, clear instructions on what goes in their bin. And that may be very different from one facility to the next, so it has to be customized for each facility so that it makes sense. And then using that data to drive decisions. Again, giving people data and giving it in a format that is understandable and usable is key. And really for us, simple, you should save some money, and streamlining your operations is the ultimate goal of becoming a RecycleSmart client at the end of the day. All right, so let's talk a little bit about on-site organic waste processing, because that's why you signed up for this webinar. So big picture, what it means is using an on-site processor of some type to process your organic waste. And typically these look like this pictured PowerNot LFC digester, some kind of piece of equipment that takes your organic waste and processes it into a different form. And as we're going to talk about today, that could be either a wet or a dry product. So it could be wet, meaning a slurry that either would go into a holding tank or in some jurisdictions go down the sewer, or dry, which would take your organic waste and turn it into a dry product, which is more of a residual that can be used for further processing for compost or in agricultural purposes. Varying degrees of sophistication. So you've got some that are very sophisticated. They've got the overall kind of process of the actual machine being processed, and then you've also got the ones that are much more high tech. So they've got Internet of things on them, scales, etc. So it's an interesting kind of all over the place in terms of the sophistication of what you're seeing. And different sizes equal different capacities. So you can really get big machines that can do quite a bit, and then you can also get smaller machines that do for something like a small restaurant or something like that. So it really depends on kind of what you need for your particular operations, and if you are looking to process a lot of your waste or just a little bit, there's probably a machine that is the right size for you. So why do this? You've got capacity issues. If you have a small number of bins on site and you have a busy weekend or something abnormal happens in your operation, then you may decide that your bins all get full. But with a machine, you've obviously got the capacity that you can continually load in most of the systems and not have to worry about overflowing. So that's one thing, is to have larger capacity on site and not worry about running out of containers. Odors and pests, so you're not storing large amounts of food waste on site. Instead of storing it, it's being processed. And then cost control, which would be lease rental costs is constant for the term. So if you're leasing or renting the machine, you know that your lease cost is going to stay that static cost all the way through, and your only variable would be power consumption and possibly water use. And reducing carbon emissions, so if you're generating a lot of organic waste, you have a lot of truck visits to come and collect your waste with the traditional method. And this way you would have less of those trucks showing up at your loading dock each day. And possible beneficial use, where the output may be used in local gardens and landscaping. One thing about this is kind of think about the long term. So if you're generating a fair bit of residual waste, you may be able to use your local community garden or maybe your flower beds around your facility, but obviously long term you're going to generate a lot of material, and it may not be able to be used at your local facility or even around your facility, because you'd have piles of residual material, mountains of it. So you have to think about, could I do this sustainably for years in the future? And some additional installation considerations, tippers and lifters. So obviously if you're loading these machines with heavy organic waste, you have to think about, how's my staff going to do that safely? And so there are tippers that are available and can be connected to the machine so that you don't have that manual lifting and the risk of injury. Also need to think about cleaning, on how to keep the internal totes clean. Ventilation. So for most of these systems, especially the dry ones, there is a need to vent warm, humid air directly to the outside. And space and power. So where will it go, and do you have the power required? A lot of these systems are commercial grade with high power requirements. So you may need 208 or some other kind of high voltage outlet close to where the machine is in order to power it. So just something to think about. If you don't have that in place, how will you get it there, and how much will that cost? When we talk about the ROI calculation for any type of on-site processing equipment, really what we want to look at is what's the current cost of organic waste collection. So this would be if you do have organic waste collection right now in terms of with totes, and you're currently collecting it that way, then you just compare basically what am I currently paying to remove the organic waste and what could I pay with on-site. If you're not separating your organic waste currently, then you have to do a little bit more complicated math and figure out how much do I have in my waste stream and how much do I think I'm going to be able to divert, and then figure out if I diverted that, what would it mean in terms of reduction in tipping fees. So a waste audit would be a good place to start to get that data. And then obviously you'll have to make some assumptions on how successful you will be at diverting the organic waste, because you're not going to likely divert 100% of it. And then when you look at the cost of on-site, you've got the cost of the equipment, so purchase, rent, or lease, depending on how you want to do that. And then the cost of residual removal in the dry systems. So with the dry systems, you are going to end up with some kind of residual material that will have to be removed or processed or go somewhere. So there might be a cost associated with that. And then power and sewer and water for the wet systems, power for both and sewer and water on the wet system. And then any amortized capital improvements. So if you do need to bring in power or upgrade ventilation, or maybe you need to do some construction in terms of like a dedicated room or something like that, then those costs should be also factored into the ROI. All right, I'm going to switch it over now to Alistair McCallum, RecycleSmart account manager, and he is going to be speaking a little bit about who needs organic waste processing and who can benefit from on-site. And I'm also just going to switch my share so you can just see the presentation here, because I think I've shared the wrong one or the wrong side. One sec here, guys. Perfect.
Yep, thanks, Colin. So looking at who would benefit from this kind of machinery, I'm going to dive into kind of what sites would benefit from this. And if I just move on to the next slide here. It's not letting me.
Oh, that's okay. I can advance it here for you. Oh no, you're good.
Yeah, so if your site currently looks like any of these pictures here, so a full kind of army of totes sitting around and having multiple service days each week, then there's options for you. So the kind of clients that would benefit from having this machinery on site: hotels, restaurants, grocery stores, like food courts, anyone who's producing a lot of waste or organic waste right now and requiring a whole heap of service and a whole heap of totes on site, then yeah, this is likely for you. Then, so looking at what options are available right now. So the main like market option across Canada is the basic level of tote tip. So contents are emptied, a clean liner is given. There's no like cleaning of the tote itself. It's just a basic tip level, and that can result in odors. And we see a lot of issues with totes breaking or going missing. And the picture on the right there kind of just highlights kind of one element of that, with the lid breaking off. The level up from that is the full tote swap and rinse. This is available in certain markets depending on what haulers are there, but this one's kind of risky sometimes, because we saw recently in Vancouver with a local provider going out of business based on what the costs of doing this are. So this could be available to you in certain markets, but not everywhere. So this is better in terms of you get that clean tote given every service, but again, you still need a high amount of service and you're still using the same totes, which again can cause issues. I'm looking kind of more in depth at machinery. Next slide here. So, well, bigger equipment options here are front load bins. And again, these are available in certain markets based on temperature. So they're common around the lower mainland in around Vancouver here, but not in kind of colder climates. These are more cost effective than totes. They hold bigger like volumes of organic waste. But again, looking at haulers, they're imposing more restrictions on these based on weight. And again, with the cleaning element, they only clean when you want them to be swapped out. There's no kind of cleaning per service available. Looking at compactors here, these are great in terms of reducing service level, but then not so much with the cleanliness. So if you're having this serviced, like let's say once a week, keeping it longer isn't advisable based on anaerobic breakdown of organic matter. That's going to release odors and gases. So you want these things serviced at least, well, once a week at minimum. And then cleaning wise, to have these things cleaned out requires a lot more labor, and again, the costs associated with that. And these two are linked in terms of the disposal rates dictate the costs, and we're seeing disposal rates go up in many markets across Canada. So the longevity of these likely isn't great. And going on to the next slide here. So looking at the processing type machinery available right now. So there's two main schools of so the first one is the wet, so digestion. So this basically involves a blender type machine, taking the volume from a site, adding in water, mixing it together, and then depositing it into a tank or down the sewage system. So these can be installed in kitchens, so reducing touch points in terms of having internal totes to collect. You can put the material straight into a collection system, and then it's kind of gone. The issues with that, so contaminants that go into the digestion machines can cause issues and require like lots of maintenance to repair most of the time. And then looking at like the waste water that is going into these, if that's going into the sewage system, that isn't then tracked as diversion. It's going as a waste stream rather than being captured as organic material avoided from landfill and going to a kind of compost facility. And the market for digestion machines is bigger in the east. There's more infrastructure around that, and not so much in the west. So if you were to install one of these in Western Canada, you're kind of at risk of what the market would dictate in terms of who would service it. And then again, the disposal costs linked to the matter coming from the site and being taken to these facilities. And then just touching on kind of contamination here too. So if you were to put in the means of eliminating contamination aren't really in place right now. So metal can be taken out by a magnet, but then if you're placing in kind of bigger pieces of contamination, that's going to cause issues down the line. If I go on to the next slide here. Then the next school of thought is dehydration, which is the dry kind of processing piece here. So these are more common in the western part of Canada. Jeff's going to dig in deeper onto the kind of tech specs and how that relates to installation later on. But high level, heat removes water from the organic material, and the compost process started by the microbes. That's going to reduce the amount of volume leaving the site and leaving you with a compost matter. Internal totes will still be needed to capture the material and transport to and from the kitchens to the machinery. Then the matter can be used at the end for gardens, flower beds, if they're on site. But if not, then you still have the reduced amount of volume leaving, and then again, disposal costs come down or the service level is reduced. And then the good thing about these machines is that contaminants can be safely removed by hand. So for example, if plastics end up in there, then there's easy mechanisms to remove these. And then you aren't kind of paying for the maintenance and repair as much. And then what's good about dehydration too is that there's already established infrastructure in place for the back end service. So with the totes, then you can still have service and have choices over who is best like in your market area to take the material away from the site. And then going on to what's the best option for me. So some key considerations for the site level. So space is a premium, as we know, kind of downtown Vancouver here and the clients we work with. So yeah, if there is space on site at loading docks or internally, then having this kind of big machinery piece is viable. One consideration here though is that it won't work in colder temperatures externally, so you'd need that internal space and cover to allow these machines to operate. Then looking at diversion, so this is a bit of conversation in terms of what's the best means to capture this, but if your volume is being reduced, then traditional kind of diversion tracking methods will show an impact in terms of diversion rates coming down. So that's a bit of conversation in terms of what the best means of tracking that is. But one consideration is to have, if you're reducing your volume, then via weight, then your numbers will decrease on the diversion end. One other consideration here again is composition of organic waste. If you have a lot of bones and shells and these material types that don't break down easily in the compost process, then you aren't going to yield the best results from this kind of machinery, just based on that volume won't decrease as much as fibers or kind of food compostables will. And then again, looking at like kind of staff operation here. So training can be provided to the staff on site, but then if you're looking at ROI in terms of how this will save staff labor and so on, then having these machinery pieces like nearby the sources of organic collection, that's going to be the best option to have to reduce staff staff time transporting this material. But then these machines often operate very quickly, so less than 20 seconds from kind of start to finish on the cycle of dumping. And my final kind of piece here is on how this machinery can benefit you in moving towards circularity. So the output is reduced through these machines or through dehydration in this example here. And then this can offer you a real opportunity to move towards completing the zero waste circle. There's a lot more to dive into on this topic, but at the high level, produce is brought to site, your material is captured in this machinery, and then at the end of the cycle, there's a compost addition produced, which can then be used on site as an addition to regular kind of fertilizers and compost products. And then in this scenario, you are keeping material on site, putting less back into these facilities to compost, and then you're kind of completing that circle in a way. There's more factors in this, but then at the high level, this is giving you a kind of complete circle of organic waste production. I'm going to pass it over to Jeff here.
Awesome. Thanks, Alistair, for that overview. And Alistair, I forgot to introduce you at the beginning. My apologies. So just want to introduce Alistair. He's an account manager at RecycleSmart Solutions based in Vancouver, but manages several national clients in the hospitality sector. So as you can see from his slides, working with a lot of large generators of waste, especially in the hotel space. And looking at alternative means of organic waste has been a key focus of his, proactively working to find long-term service solutions as well as identify opportunities for clients to achieve their sustainability goals. And I think you can see from Alistair's slides, he is often on the front line of the organic waste collection piece of the business and has seen a lot of the challenges that his clients have had. So thank you very much, Alistair, for that overview. And Al, I'm going to mute you now, but we'll bring you back in for Q&A at the end if that works. All right, so we're going to now switch over to our next panelist, which is Jeff Wint. And Jeff is joining us from Recycling Alternative. And Jeff is the Sales and Business Development Manager He focuses on multi-tenant properties and works with his clients to create, implement, and educate on waste reduction plans to hit corporate sustainability and environmental goals. And Jeff has a long history of working in the waste management industry on both the residential and commercial side. Jeff's attention is on helping commercial clients grapple with changing regulatory environments around organics and single-use items. This includes understanding what items are compostable, what that means, and how they can effectively implement programs to divert those materials. So Jeff, I'm going to turn you over to being the host here for a second. And just give us one sec.
All right. Well, thank you, Colin, and thank you, Alistair. That was great, and thank you everyone for joining us here today. So I'm going to give you just a brief overview of who we are at Recycling Alternative, and then get right into the on-site compost equipment that we work with. So like Colin said, we're a Vancouver-based recycling company. We started out in 1989 in a hatchback, just going around picking up paper. Since then, we've evolved to be a hauler, a broker, and also looking at equipment and trying to help figure out what the next stage of recycling is, always trying to be on that leading edge. So we've been working with on-site composting equipment since about 2009, when one of our owners, Rob Weatherby, really kind of realized that organics is going to be a problem in the totes and with that normal collection, kind of like Alistair was alluding to there. So with our composters, like had kind of been alluded to, so this is a dry composting process. You're putting in material. You get about an 80% reduction over 24 hours. The way that the machines work is through heat, agitation, and microbes. So you can see the picture on the bottom right there. There's the tote tipper that's tipping the material in through the top. Air is getting pulled through, heated up in that machine. And that's where we're seeing that reduction happen. What the machine's doing is it's taking your organic waste, and it's kind of compressing the first 2 weeks of the natural composting process into 24 hours. So that material at the end, it's not going to smell. It doesn't attract pests. There's no odors. It's an inert, immature compost material that we see there. So it can sit in totes for a couple days, and it doesn't need to get hauled off right away. Alistair kind of spoke to the reduction in hauling costs, the reduction in trucks coming and going from your loading bays. So it does need power, it does need ventilation, but it doesn't need access to drains. There's no sanitary discharge. There's no water input. So it's just your material that's going in. There's no biomix or anything like that gets added. When we do the startup of the composter initially, we'll add in those microbes, and then they'll kind of stay alive in there, provided you never empty it. So it's a little bit like that sourdough that I know you've all been working on while in isolation. Keep that in your fridge, you keep a little bit alive, and the microbes will keep going. As far as what material can go in there, so it's all your pre and post-consumer organic waste. So all the food scraps from the back of house, the food left over that your customers aren't eating. But the big win is once you start getting in all of that post-consumer packaging. So your cups, napkins, burger wrappers. As we all kind of move towards these compostable single-use items, this machine is able to help process that stuff a lot more effectively. And then you don't have that sitting in totes. So we'll walk you through a case study that we've done here. So this is Chinook Center Mall in Calgary. This is actually a picture of their old food court. They've just finished renovating it. So if anyone's in Calgary, when you're allowed to go to the mall again, definitely go and check it out. It's a beautiful new food court. So they've got about 2 million square feet, about 30 vendors in there. What we found initially is about 90% of the material coming out of that food court was going to landfill, and about 10% of it was getting composted. once we did that waste analysis, which Alistair and Colin were kind of alluding to, what we found was more like 70 to 80% of that was compostable waste. Waste that could go in the composter and get that 80% reduction rather than taking up space in your compactor. So once you're able to take that material out of your compactor and get it into a composter, that's when you can start seeing some of those savings. So you can see here, this is kind of what your sorted organic waste is going to look like. The cups are fine in there. The compostable cutlery is okay in there. And then all of your food waste as well. So if you're looking at something from a food court, what you're actually going to see is a lot more of that post-consumer packaging. A lot of the paper bags, a lot of the napkins, a lot of the burger wrappers, and not as much of that food. And then that picture on the right, that's that inert material that's coming out after 24 hours. So it's kind of a dry, dirt-like material. Smells a little bit like a chicory, but beyond that, not really a strong odor. So the machine that we put in at Chinook Center there was able to process about 1,200 pounds a day. If you're looking at your diversion on an annual, that's about 200 metric tons. So that 80% reduction means that we were pulling out about 240 pounds a day of that dry material out of that composter. So that's about a tote's worth, about a 64-gallon tote worth. So, you know, instead of seeing all those totes sitting on your loading bay, you've reduced that to just that one tote. From the machine here, you get a pretty nice view of the way that it works. So there's that tipper that Colin was saying. So it's really easy for your custodial staff to use and operate. There's no lifting, so there's no, you know, unsafe work environment that way. It's operated through the touch screen that you can see on the right there, and then it's unloaded from that door on the left. So this machine, it does have an energy save mode that is the variable cost as well. So when it, overnight, when it knows that you're not putting any material in there, when it detects that the moisture in the machine has gone down, it'll slow down, it'll lower its heat so that you're not using up as much energy. It doesn't have a huge footprint, so it's a lot smaller than a compactor. It's about 6 feet by 10 feet. It'll fit through the 200-ton machine will fit through a double door. It's specifically designed to do that because we know that that's about the space that you guys have, and nobody wants to have to take out walls or do too much construction to fit one of these in there. There's no odor, no water consumption. There's no discharge into your sanitary sewer line. So if you are looking at your lead or your BOMA reporting, you know that the water consumption is a really big piece of that. So this isn't going to affect that at all. And it can also perform a pathogen kill on the material. So if there's regulations in your jurisdiction about the material coming off your site, if it needs to be a pathogen kill, this machine can do that as well. So this is the ROI that we saw from Chinook Center. So this was based on a $60 per metric ton disposal from the hauler's side. So for you on the consumer side, that's about a $10, $12 tote. As you know, for anyone in BC or Alberta, you've seen those prices increase significantly over the last couple of years. In Calgary area, you're up to about 120, 130 dollars per ton. So you've seen that disposal cost increase. That's why your hauling costs are increasing so much. So this ROI is actually getting a little bit shorter. So just to kind of recap how it works, we're implementing some kind of sorting program to get that organic waste. The composter by itself isn't going to work if we don't have that separated organic waste to go in there. It's really reliant on there being a system beforehand to get good material going into the machine. So RecycleSmart can help set that up, or a company like mine can help set that up. It's taking that post-consumer compostable packaging, the organic waste, it's doing an 80% reduction on it. We're not ending up with any odor or any water discharge, and that's how we're going to save some money. So for property managers, you see a pretty short ROI for waste material. If you look at a compactor, your ROI is obviously a lot longer, and it's a solution for your on-site organics. For your vendors, it's an easy choice for them. There's not a whole lot of training. Same thing with your custodial staff. If you're in contracts with your custodial, you're not having to alter that to have them use this equipment. And then your customers also like that you're making an investment into sustainability.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. I've taken back control from you there. I'm going to leave you and Alistair unmuted for Q&A. So I'm just going to unmute you and we'll move into the Q&A section of the webinar. If you look on your Zoom platform, you should have a Q&A button at the bottom, and you can then type in your questions there that come in. And I've got a couple questions that have come in during the webinar, so we'll get started with those. The first question is, what can I do with the residual material from one of these dry machines? So let's say I do install one of these dry machines. What do I do with the stuff that comes out of the machine? Either one of you guys there.
Yeah,
Oh.
sorry, you go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that dry residual material, like I said earlier, it is a immature compost, so it isn't quite ready to go right onto your gardens. It can be aged to be a fully mature compost. So Alistair can kind of talk about some options on having that hauled off your site.
Yeah, so Jeff mentioned there, like you can use it on gardens if like added to other kind of compost materials, which would be great for locations that have that garden option. For those that don't, then yeah, there still needs to be an element of hauling required. So probably yeah, through totes, there's like less totes needed to haul the reduced volume and less service via trucks needed too. So it's kind of, yeah, whatever works for the individual site levels. If you're downtown, have limited space and only have space for totes, then yeah, that's the option to go with. Or if you have kind of more space and have the climate to suit front load, then that could be an option too. So it depends on, yeah, what the best kind of fit for the site is. There are options available in all markets for that material.
Perfect. Yeah, obviously changes a lot from market to market, but definitely likely a local solution in most of the major markets in Canada. Just a quick question on recording. And yes, we are recording and we'll be sending that out to everybody that is on the webinar. So you'll get an email shortly. Quick question regarding diversion rate impacts. If the material is weighed prior to putting it in the composter, can these weights be used for diversion reporting? And Jeff, I think you mentioned something about that in our pre-discussion about how you can potentially handle that.
Yeah, the material going into the machine is what you're diverting, because that's what would be otherwise going to landfill if it wasn't being diverted. So we always recommend to customers that they measure what's going in into the composter. You know, right now that composter it doesn't have a smart tipper, so we recommend periodically measuring your totes so you have an idea on the weights, and then just having a simple spreadsheet for people to track what's going in as well as what's coming out of the machine.
Got it. All right. Well, maybe something we can task our IoT team to develop is that smart connected tipper.
Yeah.
Other question, Jeff, just for you is operating temperature and capital costs for the unit installed at the Calgary Mall, if you can share a bit on that. Yeah,
so the operating temperature, it'll depend on whether it's in that EcoSave mode or not. The way that it works is in that box that you saw, there's the round tank where the material is going into, and then there's an oil heating blanket around there with augers inside that are turning it around. So we'll heat the oil up to, depending on your type of material, somewhere between about 80 and 120 degrees. And then that will heat the material inside. The heating is enough to get the moisture out of the material, but it's not enough to you know, to burn someone if they were to put their hand in there. And then the capital costs. So the equipment comes anywhere from processing 5 tons a year up to 500 tons a year. So the capital costs will obviously vary quite a bit. in there. The ones that'll do about 200 tons a year, they're normally about 145,000.
Okay, perfect. And obviously you can do some rent and lease options on those if you don't want a CapEx purchase. Two questions that are kind of somewhat related, but asking about biodegradable and compostable packaging and cutlery. What happens when you put that in? And there's a question here from Amanda saying, have you tested the end compost for contaminants when it has a lot of the compostable cutlery and other single-use fiber items? So yeah, how does that stuff break down in one of these type of machines?
Yeah, so you know, obviously there's a big range in the quality of biodegradable compostable packaging. So first of all, if it just says biodegradable or, eco cutlery, things like that, it's probably not actually a compostable product. So we always recommend that if people are looking for compostable, that they look for something that is a certified compostable product. Normally there's that, the BSI certification on it. What that means though is that it'll break down in an industrial facility in about 180 days. So like I said, what this composter is doing is really breaking or compressing the first 2 weeks of that composting process into 24 hours. So we're not going to see a full breakdown on compostable knives and forks in there in 24 hours. It'll break them apart. So if you have a fork, the fork will break apart, but we're not going to see a full molecular breakdown on those in 24 hours. As far as testing of the material afterwards, we do operate a lab as well, where we're working with some chemists to look at what that material looks like at the end. We can also do soil sample testing through UBC, so that you know exactly what's coming out of your machine. And that's when you can start to evaluate whether you can use it on site if you have that landscaping. You can work with your landscaping contractors to see how they can blend that in with other topsoil and other amendments to be able to create that nice closed loop.
Got it. Okay, so interesting. You can put those compostable items in, but they may not fully break down. Obviously, then they'll get taken off to another facility to continue that process. But yeah, okay, part of the cycle. Question about availability, and I just wanted to, for Alistair, if you want to talk a little bit about how long does it take to implement, one of these machines? If a client is, excited after this webinar and wants to, run out and do it tomorrow, what's the kind of lead time from the point where you say, yes, we're doing this, to the point where you're tipping toads and running your machine, typically, from what you've seen?
Yeah, after kind of initial like site visits and kind of looking at installation pieces, then we do the ROI kind of calculation and kind of give the data to the higher ups, and then once all that's kind of signed off, then around probably what 3 to 4 months to go from kind of hitting the button to order and then actually having it on site to use, and then yeah, staff training comes into that time frame too. So probably around 3 to 4 months to take off all the pieces and get things up and running.
Perfect. And just a quick question here, Jeff. Availability, obviously we're talking about the west of Canada, but we do operate obviously across the country. In fact, most of RecycleSmart's clients are now in Quebec and Ontario. Availability of your particular machine in the east, in terms of, do you have any installed, and are you able to support them in the eastern part of Canada?
We are actually we're scheduled to get our first installed in Ontario at the beginning of this year, or sorry, in the spring here. COVID's kind of pushed that back a little bit, but we are putting a team in place to be able to support any maintenance or customer training in the east there, so we can get them out there. It takes about another week or so on the train.
Perfect. And one last question. Someone's asking about electrical costs per kilogram of organic waste. I'm going to hop in and answer this one. Obviously, it's really depends on where you are in Canada. BC to Ontario to Quebec, really wildly different rates of electricity. So we definitely, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, you can do an estimate of how much power the machine is going to pull depending on your operations, and then do the math. But obviously the cost is going to be quite different region to region. Have you guys done anything in terms of power consumption studies with any prospects or clients?
Yeah, I've got the power estimates for kind of a high usage. So if it's never going into eco-save mode, kind of your average, and then a low as if it were in eco-save mode more often than not. So anyone that's interested, I can send those numbers through. Of course, it depends on the size of the machine as well. Your 500-ton machine needs quite a bit more power than your smaller ones. So, and like you say, Colin, that price is really going to vary throughout the regions.
Great. Well, thanks very much, guys. Alistair and Jeff, really appreciate your insight and your real world experience in implementing these types of solutions. For everyone here, this webinar will be recorded and also available on our website if you do want to circulate it within any of your organizations. And we thank you very much for joining our webinar today. And everyone out there, please be kind, stay safe, and enjoy some spring.